And the big question that I think looms over generative AI specifically is, are you going to see that same tipping point because the cost of inference are in fact so high? The operational costs are so high. It's not just the training and not just the go to market, it's the actual sustaining operational costs are so high that that's the big question mark. And to
Yes.
that end, I mean, that's sort of what we're seeing. Microsoft, and not just Microsoft, any of the publicly held AI type companies are starting to take hits because of that, because they're struggling, right? And so there is a story in the Wall Street Journal that you brought out about the headline is Microsoft's AI story is getting complicated, and it's for this exact reason, right? So unlike
Yes.
OpenAI, right, they're publicly held, and the investors are looking and saying, you're spending gobs of money in capital on all this, and is this going to actually generate the return?
Yeah, the story itself said the AI story is getting complicated, but to me it seems pretty simple. The story seems to be that Microsoft is spending a heck of a lot more money on capital expenditures, servers and chips and hardware to make AI work. They've gone up in a couple of years from something like 14% of their entire earnings going into CapEx to now 23%, and that is estimated to go up to 28% or so in the next couple of years. Microsoft is definitely buying a ton of hardware. And I think that speaks to how difficult it is to get started in AI and to do primary research and primary work if you really want to get into AI in earnest, if you're building your own products, if you're building your own models, if you really want to be an AI first company in reality, you're going to have to spend a heck of a lot more money on pure hardware. We're seeing it. We just talked about with OpenAI. We're seeing it with Microsoft. If you are NVIDIA, Jensen Huang right now, you've got to be pretty happy about seeing this, or maybe even Lisa Su over at AMD. The chip makers who can actually fill in those gaps are sitting pretty right now.
Yeah, and we're clearly seeing it filter down into a lot of the hardware players. But I think it's going to continue to beg this question as to what is sustainable. Because the part that I think is interesting with this is that Microsoft is taking the hit in part because if you remember, part of a huge chunk of their investment with OpenAI is in fact in Azure services
Mhm.
that OpenAI uses to run on. And they're really bearing a lot of the brunt when it comes to the hardware costs. And that's sort of what I'm talking about. The overall expense of this is extremely high. It's extremely intensive, and it's extremely intensive to sustain. And I think that sort of begs the question. And I probably the reason, like I said, I won't go as far as to say I'm bearish. I'm not bearish. I use it every single day, and
Mhm.
um, there is so much value generated. I mean, I already pay for a couple services. I am 100% sure that every company out there will be investing in some form of, in various forms, multiple forms of AI to power various parts of their environment because it's going to drive significant value. So I'm not bearish overall, but I do think that this may not become a game of brute force, or at least if it is the brute force, there's only a couple of survivors on the brute force level, and that most of that value is going to be generated through sort of other means.